I would like to invite the panelists from the first panel, Brett Sharps, Professor Grace Davy, Professor Tomáš Halík, Philip Donat, and Archbishop Zoria. And I would like also to invite Kelsey Sorosy from ADF International, because we dedicate all of the panels, we dedicate each panel to somebody who is somewhere in prison and need our help. So please, Kelsey Sorosy, introduce first.
We dream of and are working toward a world where individuals are free from imprisonment for simply choosing or living out their faith, where it would be unthinkable for governments to imprison individuals for their religious beliefs and practices. But that is not yet a reality. And so while we work toward this end, we must also steadfastly advocate for the most vulnerable, for those who are languishing in prison day after day simply because of their religion. This panel is dedicated to Y Quyen Badap, a Montagnard Christian human rights defender from Vietnam. In Vietnam, Y was repeatedly detained and tortured for leading a house church and advocating for the rights of Montagnard Christians. He eventually fled to Thailand to seek asylum. After he fled, he was convicted in absentia on false charges and has now been detained in Thailand since June 2024. He is at grave risk of deportation to Vietnam, and if deported, he would almost certainly face torture and persecution. His case highlights both the resilience of human rights defenders and the urgent need for governments to uphold their international obligations to protect asylum seekers from refoulement.
Thank you. Kelsey Sorosy is the Director of Advocacy for Global Religious Freedom at ADF International and the President of the UN NGO Committee of Freedom on Religion and Belief. Thank you, Kelsey, for your leadership of this part of the Council of Experts work. I'd like to congratulate Ambassador Robert Rehak for this 5th anniversary gathering of the Article 18 Alliance, and also thank Fiona Bruce and Sam Brownback for their leadership before him, and to call on all of the country leaders to please continue to carry forth and forward the important work that Ambassador Rehak is leading here today. The title of this first plenary panel is Striving for FoRB as a Source of Resilience and Religious Engagement. I think this word striving is important because it suggests putting forth great efforts with vigor and earnestness, perhaps not caring very much about style points, but doing it with genuine sincerity. The idea of resilience suggests doing it with perseverance, of doing it to survive and thrive, and suggests the idea of coming out stronger after the crucible of persecution. And this idea of FoRB as enabling religious engagement suggests that religious engagement can move beyond dialogue to multi-faith partnerships that engage in meaningful work that integrates top-down and bottom-up approaches, that takes the best of our thinking and our traditions and brings it together in actions that come together in partnerships. The 3 themes that this panel will address, as described in the program, are the transformative potential of freedom of religion and belief. Secondly, how freedom of religion and belief can create constitutional space for healing, inclusion, and collaboration that can strengthen democratic cultures. And thirdly, how emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence can be used in beneficent ways to uplift human dignity and religious freedom and discouraged to be used in maleficent ways that degrade human dignity and freedom of religion and belief. To guide us in this discussion, we have four extremely qualified and inspiring discussants. We've asked each of them to begin with a no longer than 5-minute introductory statement, and then we'll open the conversation. First, we'll hear from Professor Grace Davie from the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom, one of the world's foremost sociologists of religion. We'll then hear from Professor Tomáš Halík from Charles University, right here in the Czech Republic. He is a famous and, more important, thoughtful public intellectual, one of the most famous and thoughtful here in the Czech Republic. We'll then hear from Ambassador Philip McDonough, who's an adjunct professor at Weymouth University and the former Irish ambassador to India, the Holy See, Finland, Russia, and the OSCE. Ambassador McDonough, we're honored to have you here with us. Finally, we'll hear from Archbishop Eustrasis Zoria from the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. We've already heard him pray on our gathering today, and Archbishop Zoria, I think of you as an indispensable voice calling in the wilderness, and we look forward to your voice calling to us this morning. Professor Davie, let's begin with you.
Thank you very much for your welcome. I'm very privileged to be here. I count it an honor to be in this gathering. 5 minutes, 5 points. How do I, a social scientist, understand religion? I think of the power of religious ideas to motivate, the power of religious practices to shape ways of life, of religious communities to mobilize, and of religious leaders and symbols to legitimate calls to action. This is a powerful force. Whether the group be small or large, it will punch above its weight in a society, but it can be powerful for good or for ill. We need to pay attention. What do I fear? I fear a religion that has been co-opted by the state, the Russian case. I fear a state that has suppressed or eliminated or tried to eliminate religion, the Chinese case, and many others which are closer to one or to the other. Remember that one can change very rapidly from one to the other. We rejoiced after '89 in the resurgence of the Orthodox Church in Russia. We now feel rather differently about what is happening there. This is my context for a few remarks about the freedom of religion and belief. In this, I want to take two things I've learned from Professor Halík, who will speak to you in a moment. We must pay attention to context. Detail matters. You cannot assume that what works well in one place works well in another. You must understand the place you are working in and encourage the things that go well, restrict the things that are less good, but don't assume there is one size that fits all. Religion, freedom, or religion itself, but the freedom of religion of belief, the detail will look different in different places, even if the principles remain the same. And I get a little bit irritated when people talk about different religious communities, the freedom of religion, as if everybody was the same. This word diversity is difficult to handle. There is a huge difference by diversity brought about by in-migration. A lot of that is discussed in post-2015, particularly in the large number of people coming from the Middle East into Europe, which is politically extremely consequential and difficult to handle, that is quite different from small groups who are indigenous to Europe sometimes, sometimes not, who are in a completely different political situation, invoking a completely different dialogue. We must think differently about different groups. These are not blueprints that you take around in a portfolio. You must deal with what's on the ground, both in terms of what is coming in, what is splitting up and breaking up in the location you're thinking about, and the host society and its long history also makes a difference. What goes well in England, Britain, I know this, is much more difficult in France, our very near neighbours, and that point can be extrapolated many times over. And I end by recommending a little gem, 80 pages, written by a German social theorist. The title is Democracy Needs Religion. If there is no space in society for healthy religion, not all religion, but what I call well-functioning, sound religion, it is not a democracy. Any society that tries to suppress or expel this dimension of life cannot be counted as a democracy. And what, according to Hartmut Rosa, is its great offering to society, religion? It is, as people have remarked this morning, and I find that fascinating, the space to listen. Democracy requires that we do all have voices, but we also all have ears. We must use them. We listen carefully to one another. It rests on the text, God give us a listening heart. Therein is the resilience of religion and also the freedom to believe. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, just 3 or 4 short points. Religion is a very ambivalent phenomenon. A spiritual power of religion may be used as a healing power, as a moral inspiration, a reconciliation, but also as a destructive weapon. Secular society has underestimated the power of religion, especially the psychological power of religious language, symbols, rituals. They are the keys to the very deep level structure of human psychology, connected with what the analytical psychology calls the collective unconscious. The irresponsible use of sacred symbols in a political disputes can lead to the demonization of opponents and the sacralization of one's own political leaders. If we perceive political opponents as a great Satan and empire of evil, then political conflicts can become the scene of apocalyptic wars between good and evil, in which there is no room for peaceful negotiation, compromise, and reconciliation. If one's own nation, party, or leader becomes a messiah and redeemer, then can easily turn into a deities demanding bloody human sacrifices. One of the duties of the religious communities, and especially theologians, is to desacralize the political sphere. So I will short it. In many European languages, the word religion is derived from Latin verb religare. It means to reconnect. it was the traditional role of religion to be the integrative source of a society. But this role of religions was mainly lost in the modern era after Enlightenment. Religion became just one sector of life, of society and individuals. And many religions lost this integrative role. But there is another possibility, there is another possibility to interpret the word religion from relegere, to read again. And I think it is a great challenge now that the religions could be the new hermeneutics, could be the art to read again our Holy Scriptures, to read again our traditions in a new context, to read again our own life, to read again the signs of the times, the language of God, through the events in culture and society. This relecture, to read again, to listen more carefully, to interpret deeply. I think it is something which could be a very important role of religion in the future. I would like to mention the legacy of Pope Francis. Pope Francis left some great ideas, great intuitions, which should be developed more. One is the reform, the synodal reform of Christianity. Synod, it means synod from a common way, to go together in respect and listening. I think it is something, this synodal renewal of Christianity. Pope Francis said it is the task of Christianity for the third millennium. But I think it's more, it may be something more than reform of the Christianity, reform of the Catholic Church from the rigid system to the culture of mutual listening, more flexible. I think it could be an inspiration also for the relations between churches, religions, cultures, and nations. This to go together, to listen to each other, to try to understand each other better. To create the atmosphere of communication. It was said many times, even today, that democracy needs also some special moral atmosphere, the atmosphere of sharing the ideas, discussion. And there was a great fruit of modernization was the globalization process. But we are interconnected now in the level of technology and economy, but the common communication in politics, in culture, in the religion is much more complicated. And I think this process of globalization collapsed because we were not able to create some common language. So it was the role of religion, but no religion could be a hegemon now. We are in the age of the radical pluralism. But there is the challenge to create this atmosphere of communication, to turn the globalization process in the process of the culture communication and sharing. The Catholic Church began during the Second Vatican Council to be more open, more ecumenical, more universal. It was the way from Catholicism to Catholicity, universality. There was a challenge for the deeper and broader ecumenism, not only among the Christian churches, but also among other religions. Dialogue with the people outside of religious communities. And Pope Francis got something like the fourth ecumenism, also the respect to the voice of the voiceless, to the nature, the responsibility also for the nature, to make from the whole our planet the common home. So I think there are some ideas we should perhaps more develop and reflect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador McDonough. I'm very grateful for the invitation from Ambassador Rehak to speak this morning, and I'm very grateful to Brett for the kind words of introduction. The terms of reference for our panel include the phrases strengthening democratic culture and frameworks for healing inclusion and religious engagement. Taking these phrases as my starting point, I will argue first that the political process on its own cannot generate or guarantee the cultural conditions on which democracy depends. And second, I will make some practical suggestions in relation to frameworks. Democracy depends on high-level values such as trust, love, and hope. Yesterday, the UN Special Rapporteur, Nazila, mentioned another high-level value, patience. We do not legislate for trust, love, hope, or patience. There's always a distinction, or better, a dialogical relationship between the granular provisions of the law and an underlying ethos. For religious believers, this makes immediate sense. I think it's also true that for us, as Peter Tocqueville said, it makes immediate sense to say that life and politics are a journey. And for us, it also makes immediate sense to say that in the end, there is something given about peace. The challenge is to persuade others that a coherent understanding of the nature of politics requires us to engage with religion. There is something above us, beyond our poor power to add or detract, to quote Abraham Lincoln. In the Sophocles play, Antigone, risking her life in order to perform a religious rite over the dead body of her brother, explains herself as follows: I wasn't born to join with others in hating, but to join with them in love. The stance of this young woman on behalf of human values and human dignity represents all of us. The foundational thinkers of democracy saw clearly the difference between changeable laws and regulations and the values that are true yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In other words, the criterion of evaluation for any particular political choice is that it should fit within a worldview that is above day-to-day politics. If this distinction between high-level values and particular choices is accepted, we come at once to my second point. How do we identify our most important cultural resources and interpret, clarify, and nurture our high-level values? One essential pathway is a sustained dialogue in well-designed frameworks of engagement or spaces of shared projection. My proposal is to build on this important gathering in Prague by working to improve our frameworks of engagement at the regional, global, and national levels. Article 17 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union already provides for an open, transparent, and regular dialogue with churches, religious associations or communities, and philosophical and non-confessional organizations. The next Article 17 meeting in the European Parliament will take place on Tuesday afternoon, the 2nd of December. The Parliament could perhaps identify 3 or 4 topics on which we, as stakeholders, can begin to reflect over the coming year. One of our centres, and I'm speaking about our centre in Dublin City University, one of our main areas of research accepts the premise that the pursuit of shared values in the 21st century is in part an inter-civilizational, intercultural, and interfaith project. To look for a new framework in which to explore the potential of inter-civilizational dialogue is not to cancel other narratives or to replace existing structures and strategies. On the contrary, I'm speaking about an additional investment in a new dimension of diplomacy. I think there's a connection with what Father Tomasz was saying just now about bringing the values of synodality into the public sphere. And I think there's also a connection with what Father Tomasz was saying about sharing. At the very origins of political theory in Europe, we have the concept of koinonia, or sharing, which in Latin becomes communio, communion, but it means in Aristotle a sharing in reflection or a sharing in deliberation. And I think what the world religions can bring is the insight that this sharing has to be a very practical sharing. The foundation of everything I'm saying is, of course, the protection of freedom of religion or belief and respect for the status in law of churches and faith communities. I will not say anything about the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement, or the Belfast Agreement in Northern Ireland, is something in which I participated, and I think it is a light for anyone who is looking for a way of reframing tragic situations in order to repair relationships in a medium-term perspective. Our agreement was win-win-win within Northern Ireland, on the island of Ireland, in our 2 islands, and for Europe. So to sum up, there is a dialogical relationship between the granular provisions of the law and the high-level values that shape our culture. And secondly, in this perspective, we need frameworks of engagement in which to juxtapose our religious faith with our experience of particular situations. In my personal opinion, and I end here, resilience in global food systems should be at the top of the agenda within the frameworks of engagement or spaces of shared projection that we develop over the next few years. Speaking at the FAO on the 16th of October, Pope Leo expressed confidence that, this is a quote, "If hunger is defeated, peace will be the fertile ground from which the common good of all nations will spring."
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great privilege to be here among so distinguished audience and to share, first of all, our experience. Today we had invocation with our brothers and colleagues from Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, which embody a real experience of not just peaceful coexistence of different religious communities, churches and organizations in Ukraine, but real fruitful cooperation and a real unity. Unity not in a sphere of theology or practicing religion, but unity in our common understanding of our values, specifically in front of big challenges which Ukrainian society faced with. Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations will celebrate next year 60 years of fruitful cooperation, and existed from 16 members representing all major religious communities of Ukraine, and almost 95% of entire religious network of Ukraine. Members of our council are equal in their rights, and all our decisions we made unanimously. Every half of the year, chairmanship goes to the next member, and now our current chair is Supreme Mufti of Ukraine, Sheikh Ahmed Tamim. We created this council 30 years ago just like a platform where voluntarily all our major religious communities can share their thoughts, and to find a way how we can manage problems together. Because after collapse of the Soviet Union, we really realized that it's not possible to protect our freedom if we are alone. Because freedom for a particular church or religious community is not possible to protect in a modern world if you are alone. And we must combine our efforts. We must find allies not among others who share the same faith and same tradition, but among those who are around us. And one of the main goals of our council is to be a live picture for Ukrainian society. How it's possible at the same time to be different, to follow your own tradition, to keep your own identity, your own language, cultural, religious identity, but at the same time to be united. Not to be unified, but united as a community, as a society. And during this time, we had many challenges. We had two political revolutions, Orange Revolution and Revolution of Dignity. We had two phases of Russian invasion. In 2014, we had start of aggression. Russia occupied Crimea and parts of Donbass, and then in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion. And during all these times of challenges, as well we had a pandemic crisis, during all this time of challenges, we find the voice, we find the one common statement to society and to our partners on behalf of religious community of Ukraine. And I think it's important example how we bring to our society more resilience to that challenges what we face it. And I think it's a real God's blessing that we have such unity and mutual understanding, and we would like to share our knowledge and to share our thoughts with everyone who would like to communicate, to cooperate, and to help us. And specifically, it's important to emphasize that for this last 3.5 decades after collapse of Soviet system and Soviet Union, freedom of religion, principle of freedom of religion, faced with new, maybe new for our generation, but deeply rooted in the history, challenge that religion, which was oppressed in many countries before, how religious institutions in some countries and societies become to a tool of oppression and justification of aggression. In case of Russia, we can see how Russian Orthodox Church and other many major religious centers converted from those who raised their voice for freedom, for democracy, to instruments of this hybrid war, specifically since 2022 and full-scale invasion. And now, on behalf of religious community of Russia, it is proclaimed this war on Ukraine is a holy war. This is an existential war between Kingdom of Heaven, which embodied in Russia, and godless West. And Ukraine is just a battlefield. And it's a challenge for all of us how we respond of this type of weaponization of religion, how we can help those who inside Russia, who inside Russia's religious communities, in Russian Orthodox Church and other communities, who oppose this type of behavior and this weaponization of religion, how we can help them to be heard, how we use this experience, because one of the topics of our common work is early warnings, early signs of problems. Now, when we try to rethink what had happened for these 3.5 decades, we will see clear that crisis not become at once. This problem been created for long period, but maybe many people just try to don't think about this, don't act or try to find smooth solution and still to cooperate with those institutions which was really subordinated to the state and slowly converted to be a tool of aggression. I thank you all for all your efforts, because it's so important, and this is my final point, that understanding of importance of religion return it to public sphere. Almost half of the century ago, many politics specialists think that religion slowly dies. And in 21st century, religion finally become a private thing. But now we can see how it's important to understand religion and to help religious communities to be active, to be resilient, to be those who cooperate each other in societies, and specifically to be responsible during the time when we have many challenges, and specifically when all the world overthrew by many dictators, and when in many places war just spreading. Thank you for your support, and I would like to bring your attention to exhibition. May you saw during your entrance at the main hall on both sides is displayed some icons. This is specific icons. These icons created on ammunition boxes from specific places where in Ukraine our country resisted to Russian aggression. As a symbol, how the thing related to war, it's possible to convert to something which really related to peace and religion. This is one of many visible signs of our Ukrainian attitude. We don't want to have war, we want peace, but we must protect this peace because unfortunately freedom is not free. Thank you.
We've been given just about an extra 3 or 4 minutes, and Professor Davey, you were by far the most disciplined in staying to time, and so I'd like to ask you to wrap up our panel by reflecting on what you've heard from the other speakers. And in particular, I'd like you to think about, to say something about the predominant themes that we've heard about context and listening, because this was a theme that came up not only in your remarks, but in each of the speakers' remarks. And I think it was really important to setting the stage for our discussions today. And the other theme that was really significant that came out of Ambassador McDonough's comments that built upon, he reiterated that theme, but built upon it, was the significance of patience. And so I'm hoping that you might be able to reflect a little bit on that as well. And then if you could conclude by reflecting for a moment, if you would, on what Father Zoria said at the very end, or not at the very end, but in his remarks about this, the distinction between being united versus unified. I think what he meant by that was being united without being in agreement on all things, without being in total unison. I thought that was really profound, and I'd love for you to just to wrap up our panel with a reflection on those 3 themes, if you would.
Am I on now? Can you hear me? We were very largely in agreement that we expressed it in different ways, out of different contexts, from different disciplines. And I think this is probably what we say to you. We pay attention to context. I would do it in a different way from my colleagues, but we would all do it. The notion of listening was very, very clear. We must listen to each other if we are to make any kind of progress in dialogue. This is not a dialogue of the deaf. Hear what your interlocutor says. If they agree, fine. If they don't agree, take it forward, find a common way. Be patient. It's not going to happen in 5 minutes. I think the one analogy that I would like just to add is, I don't know whether you know this, we say it at home, if minority religions are suffering, even if they're tiny, numerically insignificant, it's like the canary in the coal mine. Until quite recently, I looked it up, until 1986, miners would take a canary into a coal mine because they can smell, react to poisonous gases before a human person will know the danger is present. Watch those minorities. If they are suffering, all is not well, and we should pay attention. We do not resolve this by eliminating them. I was very struck by somebody yesterday saying, if you can't deal with pluralism, you eliminate the minorities. This was a Chinese way of doing it. You don't do that. You listen, you welcome, you discuss, you talk, so that we may be united, but respecting differences, not necessarily unified. I'm humbled to be invited to do this. I've listened very carefully, particularly to what is happening in Ukraine. I hope you take the inspiration that I have felt from this morning. Thank you very much.
Archbishop Zoria, we were, I think, all really moved by your description of the unity of the religious leaders in the face of tremendous adversity. The series of revolutions, the Orange Revolution, the Revolution of Dignity, the invasion of Donbass in 2017, the ongoing Russian Revolution of 2022. And through all of these challenges, the religious unity of Ukrainians, it's a really just morally serious example for all of us. And we've been blessed to be here to witness it here with you today. Professor Davey, Professor Halik, Ambassador McDonough, Archbishop Zoria, I'd like to ask our audience to join me in thanking you for this opening panel.